All right, all right, all right. You are now rocking with the best, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to another exciting, exhilarating episode of the Catch This Fade podcast. We've been off for a couple of weeks, taking a little bit of a breather after the end of the season. We know what's happened in the meantime. Kansas City has won back-to-back championships. It's better than 49ers winning number 6, so I think everybody should be happy about that. But now it's time to really focus on the offseason and the changes that the Cowboys are making in order to get to the promised land. And I bring back one of the best guests that we have on Catch This Fade. We had him on a couple weeks ago. It was outstanding. The response to that was really good. So, of course, we had to bring him back for another one. It is the one and only from Pro Football Focus, the one and only Mr. John Owning. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, can't complain. Happy to be here. Excited that you asked me on again.
Yeah, man, we definitely had to bring you back on, especially considering the news of the week. It was rumored last week. It finally came to fruition. The Cowboys have hired Mike Zimmer as a new defensive coordinator. Since the last time we spoke, we had questions on whether or not Dan Quinn was going to come back. He ended up taking the head job over in Washington, tried to steal a couple of assistants. Cowboys let some of them go, held back on others. But now we have Mike Zimmer as a defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and we will talk about the staff that he's building. It's Friday, February 16th when we're recording this, so we actually just got some recent news today about the staff that he's filling out. But let's first talk about Mike Zimmer, and we'll start with the basic question. When he was hired, when the hiring was official, how did you feel about that when it came to the Cowboys and their defense?
Oh, man, I was excited, especially for someone like me who's kind of a scheme head, X's and O's head. I'm really excited about the schematic adjustments that Mike Zimmer is going to bring to the Cowboys defense. And the first and foremost thing that makes me excited is how adaptable and amenable Zimmer's scheme is. Over in Cincinnati and Minnesota, we've seen him major, from a coverage point of view, we've seen him major out of cover 3, similar to what Dan Quinn had. We've seen him do a lot of the cover 7, which is split safety, man match coverage, which is similar to the stuff you see Nick Saban do in Alabama. And then at the end of the tenure, because he didn't have any cornerbacks worth their salt, he majored out of cover 2. So just with that basis of knowledge there, you see how adaptable he is with his scheme. And just because he he prefers the run thing a certain way doesn't mean that's what he's going to do if the players themselves operate better in something else. So it's really exciting to have someone who's willing to adapt and make adaptations throughout a season, in the off season, throughout games even. Zimmer has always been one of the best with that. So that's really, really exciting, especially because we saw toward the end of Dan Quinn's tenure, as much as he was good at putting players where supposedly they perform best, he was a little bit stubborn in his ability to adjust and adapt his scheme. I mean, we saw it with his stubborn unwillingness to change from not matching personnel. I mean, he was playing nickel and dime packages almost exclusively, even when he was going against, 12 and 21 personnel, heavy personnel grouping. So I'm just excited from that point of view. I know we'll get more down to the nitty gritty of the schemes in a little bit, but just from an overview, I'm just really excited to have someone like Zimmer, who has a much more diverse and adaptable scheme than someone like Dan Quinn had.
Yeah, I think from the non-X's and O's perspective, I think the heavy-handed approach to the defensive group, I think that should generally go over well. Obviously, you have concerns with how your best players are going to adapt, right? So Micah Parsons has sworn his allegiance to Dan Quinn. He loves the way that Dan Quinn basically handles things as a father figure, as somebody that's like a friend to the players on the team. And the Cowboys have obviously gone in a different direction. Mike Zimmer is more known as a disciplinarian, somebody who's really not going to be buddy-buddy with the players. And I do kind of worry about how that goes across with Micah, but Micah is such a unicorn in talent. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think he is probably going to welcome a heavy-handed approach. He is going to welcome a different approach to the coaching that he receives, because we've seen over the last several years how Mike has gone to various people, offensive linemen, retired greats. He basically tries to get as much input from different perspectives as anybody that we've had on the Cowboys organization. So I don't think that he's going to buck at the change in approach when it comes to defensive coordinator, but that is something that I am keeping my eye on to see how that develops over the next year or two.
And just to go off that, I think Micah Parsons doesn't receive enough credit for the lengths that he goes to get better on every offseason. I mean, we've seen substantial improvements. I mean, I wrote about it at PFF coming out of his rookie year, the improvements he needed to make, and he made those improvements coming into his second year, and he got even better going into his third year. Like you said, he reaches out to a variety of different defensive line and offensive line coaches and gurus to help him, give him different points of view and how he can get better. And I don't think he's going to have much of an issue with Zimmer. I just think he's someone who wants to get coached. And if he sees that someone's coaching is going to make him better, I think he'll adhere to it. I think where maybe Parsons would have issues is if he's getting coached and he's not seeing the results from
Right.
the coaching and teachings that he was given. And then in that situation, I could see it kind of going haywire, but I don't think Zimmer or a guy Skinina is gonna.
Yeah, and I think Micah didn't throw Dan Quinn under the bus, but I think we kind of felt like he felt that way towards the end there in Dallas, where things were just kind of falling apart, starting with the Buffalo game, and then not being able to close out games, in those final drives against a couple of teams, and then the debacle against Green Bay in the playoffs. I don't think Micah would ever throw a coach under the bus, but I do think that some of that had to do with. Some of the issues that he might have had with Quinn not adjusting to the situation and seeing what was happening there. Let's talk about the scheme that Zimmer is going to bring to the team, because again, you said that he is very multiple. He will basically fit his scheme to what the defense does best. But what he would like to do, let's talk about what he would like to do, all things being considered, and then let's talk about the Cowboys personnel that they have to try to flow with that.
Okay, so there's multiple prongs kind of. I'm going to start with the front and then we'll move to the coverage stuff in a minute. So from a front perspective, the Cowboys have been, and when they're in a four-man front, they've been an under front under Dan Quinn, which is where the three technique aligns opposite of the tight end. And when they go to odd fronts, they play a lot of bear, which is which was every interior gap coverage. So there's a nose tackle, head up on the offensive center, and then there's two defensive tackles who are either head up or shaded on guards. Those are the two major fronts that you saw the Cowboys run. They also ran some double eagle, which is with 2-3 techniques. You saw that in their pass rush packages a lot.
Yep.
But what Mike Zimmer's going to bring to the Cowboys is he's going to bring back that 4-3, that even front over defense, similar to what Jimmy Johnson did in his heyday with the Cowboys. And with the over front, as in the under front, the defense, the three technique is opposite of the tight end. And in over front, the three technique is on the same side as the tight end. Now, what that does is that creates a little bit of a triangle with the nose tackle and the Mike. So with the three technique covering let's say the right guard, the nose tackle with an outside shade on the center, it creates a little bit of a triangle and gives coverage for the Mike linebacker. So it allows the Mike linebacker to scrape and make plays laterally a little bit more, and it protects him from being encumbered by climbing offensive linemen immediately off the snap. So that's something that's a positive. And then another positive of the 4-3 or the even front over defense is that it puts a lot of your resources on the strong side of the offensive line. So it's very, very strong against strong side runs. So it's like strong side outside zone. They do some pin and pull stuff, or if they go power, because you have more personnel on kind of that half of the defense, it makes you a little bit more secure in those areas. Now, there are a little bit of downsides. It's less of a pass rush front than an under front because you can't create the one-on-ones with the three technique in the backside defensive end as easily. But I think given where the Cowboys' issues lie, I think it's a little bit better to, put a little bit more scheme and personnel focus on stopping the run, and then allow your talent to rush the passer organically. So from a front perspective, that's great. I'm really looking forward to how changing to an over front is going to, one, make a improvement on the Cowboys defense, especially on base downs, first and second, because on third down, Zimmer has been known he gets wild and crazy on his third
Yeah.
down. His pressure
Yeah.
looks, the different type of combination coverages he runs. But then from the back end of the coverage, we kind of touched upon it. He's very flexible with what he uses, and he really curtails it to the scheme. He prefers to play a lot of press with long corners he can disrupt at the line of scrimmage. But the things that I'm excited is that he's going to bring more split safety coverages. And the thing about split safety coverages that are good is they put the math on the defensive side. So they allow you to create like 4-over-3s, 3-over-2s when offenses are not running those static 2-by-2 looks, when they're running more 3-by-1s or using motion at the line, at the snap. Having two safeties be able to run the alley and to be able to be interchangeable, depending on what the motion is, that leaves the defense a lot more options against those type of looks that the Cowboys didn't have with a single high safety scheme so much with Dan Quinn. So that makes me excited. And then another thing I'm excited about is the addition of combination coverages. It's not something that we saw a lot with Dan Quinn. It was mostly cover one, cover three, and then they would use kind of cover two as a mix up, as a change up to what they've been doing. Now
Okay.
it's going to be a little bit more baked in. So you're going to see them using a lot more cover six, which is cover quarters to one side and cover two to the other side. You're going to see them, like I said before, running those split safety man match coverages with that Nick Saban likes to run so much, which are so much like man the single receiver side, and then we're going to play
Yep.
different type a million different types of coverage combinations on the three receiver side. So I just think that Zimmer is going to be giving the Cowboys more answers to what defenses are doing or to what offenses are doing, instead of kind of just being like, we have the talent, we just got to rely on our talent, rely on our ability to run to the ball, and rely on creating turnovers. I think Zimmer's going to be a little bit more of a sound defense on a play-by-play basis.
No, that's great insight, and I do love the fact that you referenced how Nick Saban in Alabama has done his defense playing the man match cover seven. Obviously, there is a connection there because Trevon Diggs hopefully will be coming back completely healthy in 2024, and he is going to be the primary Cowboys cornerback. So, with that said, I could see just my limited knowledge of the scheme, but I could see that being a perfect fit with Diggs and Bland, possibly even bringing back Jordan Lewis to be the nickel corner, because the nickel corner is so important in how Zimmer runs his defense, right? So you want somebody that's going to be able to make those adjustments, make those calls on the fly for the secondary when things are in motion and when shit gets heavy. You want somebody with that kind of experience in the slot to be able to be that guy to kind of direct who's going to be covering who as far as the soft underneath of the coverage. So I'm loving that perspective. Let's talk about what Zimmer inherited when he took over Minnesota, right? Because obviously he was in Cincinnati for a while. He became the head coach of Minnesota in 2014, went on to 2021. When he inherited that team, his linebacker was Chad Greenway. His defensive tackle was Sharif Floyd. He had Xavier Rhodes at cornerback. He had Harrison Smith as his safety. And then in that first offseason, he went out and he drafted Anthony Barr, big 6'5", 255-pound linebacker in the first round, and he signed Linvale Joseph to be his stud in the middle of the defense, right? So he clearly, when he was in charge of a team, he saw deficiencies and he said, hey, we need to get that stud, experienced defensive tackle. We need to have that big linebacker. Obviously, we know how he used Anthony Barr, downhill mostly, but a big thumper type of guy. Are you expecting the Cowboys to make that to try to find those two resources? Because we've talked a lot. We talked last time. We are of the like mind. We don't think that stopping the run is really a linebacker thing. I mean, obviously linebackers are involved, but it's more about the scheme that you're playing and the defensive tackles and the job that they're doing in the trenches. So do you see Zimmer focusing on that when he's asking Will McClay, Stephen Jones, hey, give me some pieces to help take this from a really good defense to an outstanding defense? Do you see those sorts of things as being part of this, or do you think he might just kind of roll with what he has?
I definitely think you're going to see some influx of talent, especially at the linebacker position. Nose tackle, it's a little bit wonky because you just don't
Just
know what they're
drafted.
doing with Mozzie Smith and stuff like that. Is he going to be the nose tackle, or are they going to keep Hank, or are they moving? You heard whispers about Mozzie playing more under tackle, kind of under Dan Quinn. You don't know. So kind of nose tackle, I'm kind of like just kind of waiting and see what's going to go on there. I could see it going a myriad of different ways, but especially at linebacker, I think they have no choice but to bring in an influx of talent, especially because
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get Van Der Esch back. So somebody like, Aziz Al-Shaair in free agency would be somebody who I think would be great. Even somebody like a Josie Jewell could be somebody who's a little bit cheaper, who could come in and get the job done. And the thing, people talk about how important linebackers are against the run, and they are important. But in Mike Zimmer's scheme, where he's playing those double mug looks with the linebackers walked up in the A gap, they have to be athletic enough to be able to go from the A gap and run out to the flat, run out to the curl hook area. So you have to have linebackers who are not only big, and you want long linebackers so they can condense those throwing windows when they're bailing out from the A gap to wherever their coverage responsibility is given that coverage call. So I definitely think you're going to see them. I wouldn't even be surprised if you saw them double dip, grab a linebacker in free agency and then grab another one, maybe on late day two or maybe early
Right.
day three of the draft as well.
Talk to me about these assistants that we got news of today. So the Cowboys brought in Jeff Scanina as the new defensive line coach, obviously replacing Durde, who went on to be the defense coordinator of Seattle. They also brought in Paul Gunther to be the run game coordinator. And then they brought back Greg Ellis, old Cowboys name, as the assistant DL coach, taking over for Sharif Floyd, who also left. So let's run down. Do you have any thoughts in general about any of these three candidates that just kind of jumps out as far as scheme, as far as their ability, something that you've seen that they've kind of done really well in their segmented roles that they're going to have in this new defense?
Well, with our boy Scanina, if he coaches defensive line as well as he hits calf day, then the Cowboys are going to be really good because those calves, man, sculpted from stone. I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of him. I hope he wears short shorts the entire training camp. It's going to be a good place to be. But I honestly don't know much about him outside of those beautiful calves. I'm excited about Greg Ellis mainly because I know Greg Ellis is a technician. I know someone who, when he thrived because of his technical abilities, his hands, his footwork, his ability to initiate force with a strong base. You know, he was someone who, kind of similar to what DeMarcus Lawrence does. He was the strong side defensive end for Mike Zimmer, and he was probably one of the best that Mike Zimmer's had in that area. And I think DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be the similar way, and I think Greg Ellis is going to be a great kind of teacher for Zim's scheme to really help the defensive line get up to speed. And then Paul Gunther, that's the one I'm really, really excited about. He's someone who has done a really good job with linebackers. Mostly every spot that he's been in, he's been Mike Zimmer's right-hand man. He was the defensive coordinator with the Bengals after he left. He went over to be, I think he left with John Gruden to be the defensive coordinator for the Raiders when he moved over there. So I'm excited to see what he can be at the run game coordinator. I hope that he's the kind of the assistant defensive coach, kind of like Greg Edwards was. No,
George Edwards.
George Edwards. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know why I say Greg. George Edwards was where he is just a defensive line assistant, or in Gunther's case, a run game corner, but also is basically the linebackers coach as well instead of Scott McCurley. So I think that he could have a really good impact there. I think there's no one better to be able to teach the linebackers in today's NFL who are getting picked on by every offense with play action and putting them in conflict. I think someone like Gunther, who has the experience and the years baked into the Zimmer scheme to really know it like the back of his hand, he's someone who can teach them and get them up to speed really quickly.
Yeah, before we jump out, because again, we're keeping these short, and again, we're here on Catch This Fade with the one and only Mr. John Owning. Find him on Pro Football Focus. He's an editor and writer over there, making sure that he keeps all the stat guys straight when it comes to scheme and what they're seeing when they're breaking down the film. We're very appreciative of him and your time joining us. I wanted to review. I referenced it a little bit earlier. Excuse me, about what Mike Zimmer did when he took over in Minnesota as far as their drafts, right? So the very first year he went out there, they drafted Anthony Barr in the first round, got defensive end Scott Crichton in the third round. So those are big guys for their position, right? Anthony Barr 6'5", 255. Scott Crichton was 6'3", 273. Second year he went corner. He got Trey Waynes in the first round, 6 foot 186. Doubled up, got another linebacker, Eric Hendricks, and Eric Hendricks is more of your north-south, side-to-side linebacker in that he's just 6 foot, 230 pounds. He's kind of the fly all across the field, middle linebacker, the do-everything guy, while Anthony Barr was more seen as somebody that could pressure going forward. Then in the third round, he went out and he got Danielle Hunter, the defensive end, for 6'5", 252, right? Third year, went out, got Mackenzie Alexander, pretty much a slot-only corner, 5'10", 190. Kentrell Brothers, he got late linebacker, but he ended up just being a kind of a special teams guy. So even when he took over the entire team in Minnesota, those first 3 years, you can kind of see the outline of, hey, these are the guys that I really want to get to help us play the defense that that I want to see us play. And I think the interesting thing about him taking over is that in many stops, it's taken until the tail end of his first year, but really the second year for his defense to come on and show what the Mike Zimmer defense is. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Dallas. I think Dallas is starting from such a good plateau as far as how they performed in the past. I'm not going to say that week one they're going to be lights out. The offense is going to have to carry the team for the first several weeks of the season. But I could see by mid-season, if he has the tools in place, if he gets the players that can fit his defense in free agency. They throw him a bone in the draft. I talk about my commandments all the time, and Joey actually threw me a shout out earlier, and he mentioned it earlier in the week. Stole my thunder a little bit. I was saving it for this conversation. But the Cowboys don't normally throw a bunch of resources at a new coordinator in their first year. They normally wait, let the coordinator see what it looks like with the stock that he has on hand, and then figure out what else he needs. But I think when it comes to free agency and this all-in approach, I think the Cowboys might throw him a bone, get that linebacker, get that stud defensive tackle in free agency, and defensive tackles, depending on how they play. If they're pass rushers, they cost a lot. If they're run stuffers, they generally are a little bit on the cheaper side. But I think the Cowboys are going to get him the resources necessary to get that defense where it needs to be by week 7, week 8, and then it's off and running. What are your thoughts about, before we close out, what are your thoughts about the chances that Zimmer really nails this thing in the first year to where the Cowboys aren't saying, okay, well, now what do we do? Mike McCarthy's a free agent. We might even be scrambling to get a whole new staff in here. Do you think he can impact this team enough in year 1?
Yeah, I definitely think he can. I think the one worry that you have, I think the biggest worry you have is that it will take a little bit maybe too long is the wrong word, but take longish for the players to get adapted to the scheme, especially on the back end and the coverage wise, because of all the different coverage checks that Mike Zimmer incorporates. I mean, one of the positives of Dan Quinn's scheme was how easy it was to implement and how easy it was to learn. There wasn't as many coverage checks and stuff. They played a ton of man coverage. They played a ton of cover 3. So the rules were pretty simple and easy to incorporate. But when you're starting to add in all of these different, man match cover 7 concepts with all these different alerts, you got the 3 in the seam alert, you got a jump alert, you got all these different things that you have to get on the same page, and you have to read things the same while different offenses are doing different things with motion and stuff. You have to do it on the run. So I could see that taking it a little bit, but I think the Cowboys are pretty smart in the secondary, especially when you have a guy like Trayvon Diggs, like you said, who has experience in the Nick Saban system, which is as complicated of a coverage system as you can get. You got Stephon Gilmore, who's, if they bring him back, he's a veteran. He's played in every scheme. I mean, he played with Bill Belichick, another guy, one of the most complex coverage systems there is out there. I think Deron Bland's a really smart guy. I think he's a person who communicates well. So I think the Cowboys won't have, and we talk about it a lot, the Cowboys do have a lot of talent. And I think that talent's going to help ease the learning curve that they're going to have. Obviously, I think early in the year, like you said, things could be a little bit wonky, but toward the end of the year, I think, whereas the Cowboys defense a lot of times has played their best ball, in the beginning and middle of the year, I think you could see the Cowboys playing their best toward the end of the season, and that's when teams are really dangerous.
All right, man, I appreciate your time. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up for this episode of Catch This Fade. Again, you can find him on Twitter at John Owning. Find him online, Pro Football Focus. Basically, if you see them talking really smart about a scheme, just give John credit. That's what I do. Anytime I see a good PFF article, I was like, okay, John, help them out on that. So that's how we're going to roll with it. We appreciate y'all. Make sure you pound that subscribe button. You follow us on Twitter. Of course, I'm the managing editor of Cowboys Wire. Find the Catch This Fade podcast on YouTube. Find us on TikTok. Do whatever you need to stay caught up as this off season continues. John, appreciate your time, my man.
Thank you.